The age of democracy was once the age of contemplation, but that world is gone. That is a heavy way to start the day, isn't it?
It is heavy. It's almost funereal. It sets a very specific, very somber tone.
But that is exactly where our source material starts today. It's a provocative assertion, and honestly, when I first read it, it felt like a punch in the gut. It suggests that we've lost something fundamental, not just in our politics, but in our biology almost, that we've lost the ability to think, to actually sit still and just think.
To contemplate, yeah. To just let an idea sit in your mind without immediately needing to react to it or share it or attack it.
Exactly. So, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling a really dense text called The Corruption of the Faithful. And I want to stop right there on the title because I know what you're probably thinking.
I can guess.
You see corruption in the faithful and you think, okay, great, an hour on the scandals of the Catholic Church, or here we go, another takedown of televangelists.
Right. Something very literal, very institutional.
But that is not what this is about, is it? Not really.
No, not at all. And I think that's the first and maybe the most important misconception we need to clear up to really get what this analysis is about.
Okay, so let's clear it up.
When the source speaks of the faithful, they aren't just talking about people in pews on a Sunday morning. They're not limiting it to Christians or Muslims or Buddhists specifically.
So who are they talking about?
They're talking about you. They're talking about me. They're talking about the guy obsessively checking his crypto portfolio every 5 minutes. The whole premise here is that faith isn't just a religious mechanism, it's a human survival mechanism.
A survival mechanism. How so?
Well, we are hardwired to believe in things. We need a framework, some kind of story, to make sense of the chaotic, often terrifying world around us. So in this context, the faithful is, well, it's anyone who places their trust in a system to order their reality.
So the faithful could be a diehard Apple user. It could be a hardcore Marxist, a libertarian.
Absolutely. It could be someone who just really, really believes in the science with capital letters, or the market, or the party. The corruption the text talks about is how that deep biological need for meaning, that God-shaped hole, if you want to use the old Pascal term, has been hijacked.
Hijacked.
It's been co-opted by politics, by economics, by ideology. It's being exploited.
That is actually terrifying.
Yeah.
Because the implication is that we aren't making rational choices. We think we are, but we're actually being manipulated on a much deeper, almost spiritual level.
We are being biologically hacked. Our operating system has a vulnerability, and that vulnerability is our need to believe.
And the central thesis here is quite stark. The argument is that modern civilization isn't going to end with a bang. It's not going to be the nuclear war or the killer asteroid we see in the movie.
Always what we're all prepping for, right?
Right. We're all watching the skies, building our bunkers.
But the source argues the collapse is internal. It's quiet. It's the slow erosion of meaning. Basically, we are destroying ourselves from the inside out because we no longer know why we are here or even what is true anymore. We are dismantling the structural integrity of our own minds.
The source material paints this really vivid picture of new gods. It says the silent judges of the old world. Sacred texts, tradition, fixed moral codes have been evicted. We decided they were too rigid for us.
We kicked them out. We had a revolution against them. And in their place, we have these fluid, shifting gods of public sentiment, gods of the algorithm.
And those new gods are controlled by whoever masters language and currency. That's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
It's a shift from the eternal to the ephemeral, the thing that's trending right now.
Exactly. And that shift has profound consequences.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have a lot of ground to cover because this analysis is dense, and quite frankly, it's going to challenge a lot of the basic assumptions we hold about how our society works. We've broken it down into 3 main pillars to get through. First, we have the shattered logos. This is all about how truth itself has been weaponized. Second, the theocratic democracy, which, that sounds like a complete contradiction in terms. I'll have to get into that one. And third, and this might be the darkest part of the whole text, capitalism as the new god.
That last one is particularly sobering. It's where we really look at how the market has effectively replaced the spiritual, filling that void we mentioned, but maybe filling it with something that is actually slowly eating us alive.
Let's start with that first pillar then, the shattered logos. Now, I haven't taken a philosophy class since my sophomore year of college, and I I barely stayed awake in that one, so help me out here. When the source uses the word logos, they aren't talking about corporate branding or graphic design.
No, no graphic design here. Logos is one of those huge Greek words that's almost impossible to translate with just a single English word. It's heavy. It has a kind of gravity to it.
So give us a history. Where does it come from?
Well, the pre-Socratics, like Heraclitus, used it. The Stoics built a whole philosophy around it. In the Gospel of John, it's used to describe the divine. In the beginning was the word, the logos. But in the classical philosophical sense that the source is using, the logos is, think of it as the divine principle of order. It's reason with a capital R.
Okay.
It's the idea that the universe isn't just random chaos. It has a structure, a blueprint, an underlying intelligence or pattern that is discoverable.
A blueprint. I like that analogy. It's concrete.
Think of it like a house. The logos is the foundation and the framing. It's the idea that there is an objective reality, an up, a down, a true, a false, and that our human reason, our own little logos, is capable of discovering and aligning with that larger structure. It anchors civilization.
So even if we disagree on where the furniture goes,
We can at least agree that the floor is the floor and the ceiling is the ceiling. We share common reality to have our arguments within.
but the source argues that in the modern state, the logos is shattered. What does that mean in practice?
It argues that truth is no longer a foundation we build upon together. Instead, truth has become a battlefield. It's a territory to be conquered. This is a crucial distinction.
How so?
In the past, wars were fought for physical territory. I want your river, I want your gold mine, I want your port.
Tangible things, resources.
Tangible resources, yes. But the argument here is that we have shifted to a war of narratives. The primary battlefield is now human consciousness. We are fighting for the story.
I love how the text puts this, although it's disturbing. It says, victory belongs to those who control the framework of the conversation, not those who are factually right.
Yes.
That feels incredibly relevant to the way we scroll through our news feeds today. It's not about what happened. It's about how it's framed,
Yeah.
the spin.
That's the key insight. If you can define the terms of the debate, you've already won. You don't need to prove your opponent is wrong on the facts. You just need to frame the entire discussion so that their perspective is illegitimate before they even open their mouth.
It's like rigging the game before it starts.
Yeah. It is. The source actually breaks this down into what it calls the 3 laws of narrative war, which is a pretty stark way of putting it.
Let's go through those because they really explain the mechanics of this pervasive confusion we all feel. So law number 1, the power to name is the power to rule.
This is ancient, really. It's biblical. Go back to Genesis. Adam's first task is naming the animals. Naming is an act of ordering the world, of establishing dominion. But in the context of this shattered logos, labels become weapons. They are precision-guided munitions for the narrative war.
Give me a concrete example of this. How does it work in practice today?
Okay, simple thought experiment. Picture a group of people in the street. They're angry, they're shouting slogans, they're breaking the windows of a corporate headquarters. Now, if the media or the ruling class labels them freedom fighters or activists, what happens? What's our reaction?
We cheer for them. We see them as heroes fighting injustice. We start a GoFundMe. We put their flag in our social media bio.
Exactly. A positive moral judgment is baked into the name. Now, take the exact same footage. Same people, same broken windows, same fire in a trash can. But this time, we label them rioters, insurrectionists, or thugs.
Then we call for the National Guard. We want them arrested. We see them as a threat to civilization itself.
The reality on the ground didn't change one bit. The glass is still broken. But the name changed. And because the name changed, our entire moral reaction was flipped on its head. That is the power of naming.
So when you successfully slap a label on a person or a movement, hero, traitor, oppressor, victim, you define how the public is allowed to perceive them.
You short-circuit the entire process of critical thought.
Right. If I can label you, I don't have to debate your ideas.
Exactly. You bypass the argument entirely. If I can successfully label you a bigot or a communist, depending on which side of the aisle I'm on, I have categorized you as ritually unclean. And you don't debate the unclean. You banish them. You deplatform them.
That is brutally effective.
Yeah.
And depressing. Let's move to the second law, which I found really counterintuitive at first. Contradiction is strength. Usually if someone contradicts themselves, if a politician says one thing on Monday and a complete opposite on Tuesday, we call them a flip-flopper. We think they're losing credibility. But the source says, in this new system, coherence isn't just not required, It's a liability.
It's not only not required, it's actively discouraged in a leader or a movement. This touches on the psychological concept of cognitive dissonance, but used as a tool of control.
How does that work?
Think about it. If a leader's narrative is consistent, logical, and steady over time, you have the mental space to process it. You have time to critique it. You can measure it against observable reality.
Right. I can go back and say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't match what you said last year or what actually happened.
Exactly. But if the narrative shifts constantly, if the policy we all hated last year is now the one we must all love today, if yesterday's national hero is today's traitor to be purged, it keeps the population in a constant state of reaction. You never have time to reflect because the ground is always moving under your feet.
It's like being on a treadmill that keeps randomly changing its speed and its incline. You're not focused on where you're going. You're just desperately trying not to fall off.
And that's the goal. It paralyzes critical thinking. If you are constantly adjusting to shifting contradictions, you cannot form a stable, independent worldview. You become psychologically dependent on the narrator, the party, the media, to tell you what is true right now.
And you stop trusting your own memory.
You have to, because your memory tells you that what they're saying today contradicts what they said yesterday. So to stay in the tribe, you have to conclude your memory is faulty.
Which leads perfectly and terrifyingly to the third law. Memory is the enemy.
This is pure Orwell. This is 1984 stuff. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. If history is a fixed record of what actually happened, it's a huge problem for any power structure that relies on contradiction.
Because you can check their work.
You can check the record and say, wait, you lied, or that's not how it happened. So history can't be a fixed anchor. It has to be fluid.
It has to be rewritten in real time to serve the needs of the present narrative.
Absolutely. The past belongs to whoever controls the retelling of it. If the current narrative requires us to believe that we have always been at war with Astasia, then we rewrite the history books, we delete the old online articles, we memory hole the old videos, we tear down the statues to make it so.
So this is a corruption of memory. But the source goes even deeper, talking about the corruption of language itself. This isn't just about lying. It's about changing the very function of words, shifting language from being descriptive to prescriptive. Can you explain that difference?
Sure. Descriptive language is, in a way, humble. It tries to map reality. It says the cat is on the mat. It is an attempt to use words to describe a state of affairs that exists independently of the speaker.
It's reporting on reality.
Precisely. Prescriptive language is arrogant. It doesn't report on reality. It tries to create reality. It says the cat must be on the mat, or even there is no cat, and you're a bad person for saying you see one, if acknowledging the cat is politically inconvenient.
The text mentions two main functions of this corrupt prescriptive language. The first is to control perception. This is where we get the redefining of words like freedom or justice to mean their opposites.
It's classic doublespeak. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. But we don't have to go to fiction. Look at how a word like violence is used today. Historically, violence meant physical force, hitting someone, breaking something, concrete.
But now we constantly hear that speech is violence. If someone's words make you feel unsafe.
Right. But then in the very next breath, we also hear that silence is violence if you don't speak up for the correct cause.
You're trapped.
Precisely. You see the trap. It's a linguistic pincer movement. If speech is violence, I can justify censoring you to protect people. If silence is violence, I can justify forcing you to speak, to make a loyalty pledge, to prove you're one of the good guys. The word violence has been completely unmoored from reality. It no longer describes an action, it just means behavior the party doesn't like.
And the second function of this language, which follows from that, is to paralyze thought.
If words have no fixed meaning, if justice can mean equality one day and vengeance the next, if woman is a feeling rather than a biological reality, if democracy means censoring your opponents, then debate becomes an infinite, frustrating loop.
Yeah.
We can't actually communicate because we aren't speaking the same language anymore.
We're just making noises at each other.
We are just signaling. Which leads to the final point in this section, the ritual of empty speech. That phrase really stood out to me. The pressure to speak words, not to communicate an idea, but just to signal loyalty.
To show you're part of the tribe, I am saying the correct corporate jargon, or I am using the latest approved activist terminology.
It's a public act of submission. The source makes a brilliant point here. When you force someone to say something they know isn't true, or something that is just meaningless jargon, you are doing more than just making them lie. You are breaking their personal connection to the Logos. You are severing their connection to reality itself.
You're making them complicit in the lie.
Hmm.
They become part of the corruption.
When once you've done that, you own a piece of their soul.
Wow. Okay, so if the Logos is shattered, if truth is just a weapon and language is a tool of control, what does that do to our political system? That brings us to part 2, the theocratic democracy. Now, hold on. Theocratic democracy. That sounds like an oxymoron, a total contradiction. We live in the West. We have the separation of church and state enshrined in law. We don't have priests running the Senate. So how can the source possibly claim we live in a theocracy?
It is a provocative term, isn't it? It's designed to jolt you. But the source isn't talking about the formal institutions of religion. It's talking about the deep instincts of religion.
What do you mean by that?
The argument is that while we may have successfully removed God from the courthouse, we didn't remove the human desire for religious certainty from the human heart. That impulse for dogma, for purity, for a clear line between the saved and the damned, for heresy and blasphemy, it didn't just go away.
So the religious impulse just migrated.
It migrated to the ballot box. The source's argument is that democracy has, for many people, ceased to be a functional governance system. You know, a boring, pragmatic way to fix potholes and pass budgets. Instead, it has morphed into a full-blown faith system. It demands absolute obedience and performs complex rituals.
And it seems to thrive on its own dysfunction.
It thrives on it. The source outlines what it calls the unholy trinity of this new political order. Let's break that down. First element, the state as God.
Okay, that's a big claim.
It is. But think about how the state is presented. It's the ultimate reality shaper, the infallible authority. Even when the state is demonstrably corrupt, even when it fails spectacularly, when the wars are lost, the schools are failing, the economy is crashing, what is the solution that is always, always presented?
Usually. More state,
Yeah.
more funding for the failed program, a new government department,
Yeah.
more power to the center.
Exactly. The solution to the failure of the state is always more state. To question the fundamental legitimacy of the state itself is treated as a kind of heresy. You can criticize a specific politician, that's allowed, that's part of the ritual, but if you question the system itself, if you suggest that maybe the state can't save us or that it's the source of the problem,
Then you're dangerous. You're an anarchist, an extremist.
we're apostate.
You're outside the faith.
Okay, then you have the second part of the Trinity, the market as church. We'll dive deeper into that in the capitalism section, so let's put a pin in that for a moment. But the third part of the Trinity is the one that really hit home for me because it's about us. The citizen as believer. This is the crucial shift in the role of the individual. In a secular democracy, you're a voter. You make a hopefully rational choice based on policy and self-interest. But in a theocratic democracy, you are a devotee, a member of a congregation. And what do devotees do?
They don't just believe privately. They have to prove their faith. They police the flock.
They hunt for heresy. Exactly. The source argues that citizens now spend an enormous amount of energy policing each other for wrongthink. Look at social media. It's a massive, distributed, crowdsourced inquisition.
That is a perfect description for it.
If someone steps out of line, says the wrong thing, uses a word that was okay 5 years ago but is a mortal sin today, tells a forbidden joke, what happens?
They get swarmed. They get doxxed. Strangers dig through their entire life trying to find something to ruin them with. People demand they be fired from their job.
And then what is the required ritual for the sinner?
Oh, God, the public apology, the screenshot of the Notes app, the tearful video. I'm listening and learning. I have educated myself.
It's a confession. It's a modern, digital, religious ritual of public penance. It's happening in the global public square. But the source makes a key distinction. Unlike most traditional churches, there is rarely any actual forgiveness or redemption in the theocratic democracy. There is only permanent stain.
Right. The sin is never forgotten. It's attached to your name forever in a search engine.
Yes. And to keep this entire high-stakes religious drama running, the source says the system needs the sacrament of struggle. It requires a state of perpetual crisis.
Why is that? Why can't there be peace?
If you want to keep a population compliant and energized for your cause, you cannot allow peace. Peace is dangerous. Peace leads to contemplation. If you are sitting quietly in a peaceful, prosperous world, you might start asking uncomfortable questions. Hey, why are things the way they are? Is this system really working for me?
So the system has to generate constant noise, constant emergencies, Constant enemy.
Internal or external, doesn't matter, does it?
Not at all. As long as there is an enemy to unite against. As long as the next election is framed as the most important election of our lifetime. Have you noticed that? They are always the most important election of our lifetime.
Every 2 years, every 4 years, it's always Armageddon. This is the election that will decide everything forever.
It's the end of America if the other guy wins.
Yeah.
It's a holy war narrative.
Right. That keeps you in a state of high religious fervor. You are not just voting, you are mobilizing for a holy war against the forces of Satan, basically. And even when your side wins, the crisis never ends. A new one is just around the corner.
And this all leads to what the source calls the choice that isn't won, the illusion of choice.
The false dichotomy. The source argues that the masses are offered a stark choice by the ruling class. You must embrace this theocratic democracy with its partner, extreme capitalism, which it calls corporate feudalism, or face total, utter collapse, anarchy, the abyss.
It's a threat. Stick with us, the flawed but necessary saviors, or you get the apocalypse.
It's a brilliant form of control because it ensures that no alternative outside the established system can ever be seriously considered. You have to pick a side within the allowed parameters. You can choose Coke or Pepsi, but you cannot choose water. The idea of water is taken off the menu.
This brings us to part 3, the theology of the masses. Because if traditional religion is fading and the state is acting like a god, what happens to that innate human need for belief we talked about at the start? The source calls this the vacuum of faith.
And nature abhors a vacuum, right? So does the human soul. That's the core premise. We are believing creatures. We are hardwired to seek meaning, to be part of something larger than ourselves. If you remove those silent judges, the traditional gods, the old religions, that powerful spiritual energy has to go somewhere. It doesn't just evaporate.
It rushes into other things.
It rushes in to fill the void, and it often floods into secular ideologies, transforming them into pseudo-religions.
The source explicitly mentions communism, fascism, and nationalism as prime examples of these secular religions.
Yes, and it's important to look at how they function, not just what they say. They aren't just dry political theories in a textbook. They have their own saints and prophets, Marx, Lenin, Mao. They have their own martyrs who died for the cause. They have sacred texts. They have dogmas that cannot be questioned. And they all promise a version of utopia, a heaven on earth, but one that must be built through revolutionary struggle.
And the source gets very specific, bringing up neo-Marxism and describing its modern form as the Church of the Collective.
Yeah.
Now, we need to be really clear here, just to reiterate for our listeners. The source isn't taking a political stance for or against the economic policies here. It's analyzing the structure of the belief system itself.
That's a crucial distinction. It's a structural analysis. It characterizes it as a theology, arguing that the focus has shifted from a purely economic class struggle to something more all-encompassing, a struggle against reality itself in some cases. And it identifies these specific rituals and concepts that seem to mirror Christian theology almost perfectly.
Let's walk through those parallels it draws. First, original sin is identified as privilege.
Yes, a stain you are born with based on the group you belong to. You didn't personally do anything to acquire it, but you carry the guilt of it. And just like original sin in some theological frameworks, you can never fully wash it away. You can only confess it, acknowledge it, and perpetually atone for it.
And that atonement, the redemption, is identified as endless activism.
It's a works-based salvation. You must always be doing the work. You must be marching, posting, donating, re-educating yourself and others. There is no Sabbath, no rest. Your salvation is never secure. It must be constantly performed.
And finally, heresy is doubt. It's questioning the narrative.
That's the deadliest sin of all. To question the core dogma, to point out a contradiction, to ask a forbidden question that gets you cast out, excommunicated. It's a very tight, very demanding religious structure.
But what I found fascinating and truly disturbing was the section on breeding demons.
This was dark, yes.
The analysis here is that in most old religions, demons were external spiritual forces. They were evil spirits you fought against. But in this new theology of the masses, the source argues the demons are the people themselves, your neighbors.
The ritual of dehumanization, that's the key practice.
Explain that.
Think about the rhetoric we use today on all sides. If I disagree with you on tax policy or healthcare, we can have a debate. But what if I can convince myself and my tribe that you are not just wrong, but fundamentally evil? What if I successfully label you a Nazi, a groomer, a traitor, a demon?
Then you're no longer a human being with a different opinion.
You're a monster. a demon walking among us. And you don't debate demons. You don't reason with them. You exorcise them. You destroy them. You purge them from the community for its own salvation.
It turns citizens into monsters in the eyes of their neighbors to justify their social, political, or even physical elimination.
That's the historical pattern, yes. And the final step in this process is what the source calls the possession of the mind. It describes this as a psychological process where the individual ceases to be an individual and becomes a vessel for the ideology.
I think we've all seen this.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and you suddenly realize they're gone?
Yes.
Like you aren't talking to a person anymore, you're talking to a script, to a set of talking points. Their eyes are glazed over, they're just reciting the official lines of their chosen faith.
That is exactly what the source means by possession. The individual consciousness has been suppressed, and they have become a conduit for the spirit of the ideology to speak through them. They have lost the ability to generate or process independent thoughts that deviate from the dogma.
It's like an NPC in a video game. They just have a pre-written dialogue tree.
But an angry NPC, an NPC that wants to get you fired.
Right, so we've got truth weaponized, politics acting like a religion, and now we get to the economic engine driving a lot of this. And honestly, after reading this, I think this might be the root of it all. Part 4, capitalism as the new god.
This part of the analysis leans heavily on the work of people like Harvey Cox, who wrote about the market as God. The argument is that we have, perhaps unconsciously, deified the market. Think about the attributes we traditionally give to God. Omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent.
Okay, break that down. How does the market have those qualities?
Well, omniscient, all-knowing. That's the invisible hand. We're told the market knows all. It processes all available information and efficiently allocates all resources. We can't possibly understand its wisdom.
The market has priced it in.
Exactly. Omnipotent, all-powerful. The market dictates the fates of nations, creates and destroys industries overnight. We are powerless before its might. And it demands sacrifice.
Sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice?
When the economy is bad, what is the ritual we perform? We impose austerity. We cut social programs. We slash pensions. We let people lose their homes and their jobs. Why? To appease the market gods. To restore investor confidence. We offer up the well-being of the population as a sacrifice to make the line on the chart go up again.
And for the average person, the day-to-day worship is the sacrament of consumption.
Right. Consumption isn't just about buying stuff you need anymore. It has become a core ritual of identity. I buy, therefore I am. In a world where we've lost those traditional anchors of who we are, we don't have strong communities, we don't have strong faiths, we don't have a deep sense of lineage or place anymore. We define ourselves by our brands.
I'm a Nike guy. I only drive a Tesla. I would never use an Android phone.
Those are your modern religious vestments. They are the symbols you wear to tell the world which tribe you belong to, where you fit in the complex hierarchy of the consumer faith.
And the text talks about how the prosperity gospel, which used to be a niche theological idea, has filtered into the general culture. The idea that wealth is a sign of moral virtue.
This is deeply, deeply ingrained in the American psyche especially, but it's global now. If you are rich, you must be virtuous. You must be smart, hardworking, innovative, blessed. We worship billionaires as our saints. Conversely, if you are poor, it's not just bad luck or a systemic issue, it's a personal moral failing.
You lack hustle. You have a poverty mindset.
It reframes poverty as a sin, and that's incredibly convenient for the system.
Why?
Because if your poverty is your own sin, then the system is absolved of any responsibility to help you. Your suffering is your penance. You deserve it.
But the most somber part of this section, and the part that I think we really need to sit with, is this idea of the economy of the soul. The source describes our current system as being fundamentally parasitic.
This is the critique that goes beyond just capitalism is unfair or there's too much inequality. It's deeper. It identifies what it calls the 3 parasites of civilization.
Okay, let's list them.
First, the economic parasite. This is wealth generated not from creating anything of value, but from manipulation, from speculation, from usury. Money making money from money, without ever building a bridge or baking a loaf of bread.
The financialization of everything.
Second, the social parasite. This is the commodification of human connection, taking the natural, beautiful human need for community and romance and friendship and turning it into a data point to be sold. Social media, dating apps.
And third, the devouring class. The class of people who only extract value from the system without ever building anything.
But I want to focus on the metaphor it uses from the prodigy William James Sidis regarding animate versus inanimate energy. This really struck me as the core of the whole book.
Break that down for us, because Cetus was, I mean, a legendary genius, right? But a total eccentric.
A complete eccentric, a tragic figure in many ways. But his insight was this. Life, living things, possess animate energy. It is vital, creative, spontaneous. In physics terms, it reverses entropy locally. It creates order. The machine, on the other hand, the economic system, is inanimate. It is dead, mechanical, repetitive. It follows fixed rules.
Okay.
The source argues that our current version of capitalism has become an inanimate machine that runs on animate energy. It is a system that siphons off our human vitality, our limited time on this earth, our precious attention, our creativity, our actual spirit, and converts it into inanimate, abstract financial capital.
We're literally turning our life force into numbers.
Think about a soul-crushing burnout call. You are literally burning your life force, your health, your relationships, your best years, to make a number in a corporate spreadsheet go up. You are converting the living into the dead, the animate into the inanimate.
And once it's turned into numbers, it's dead. It can be counted, it can be traded, but it's no longer alive. The source calls this soul parasitism.
And debt as bondage is the lock on the cell door. That's the enforcement mechanism.
Debt, student loans, mortgages, credit cards.
When you are in significant debt, you have pledged your future animate energy to the system. You have sold your tomorrows to pay for today. You are, in a very real sense, a serf. You cannot leave the job you hate because you owe the machine. You cannot speak your mind freely because you might lose the income you need to service the debt that keeps a roof over your head.
It's a form of control.
It's the most effective form of control ever invented, and it leads to what the source calls the apocalypse of capitalism. Not apocalypse in a fire and brimstone end-of-the-world sense. Apocalypse in its original Greek meaning, an unveiling, a revealing.
A revealing of what?
That the system is self-consuming. It's a snake eating its own tail. An economic system without a soul, a system that runs on soul energy, will eventually eat the souls of its people. It devours the planet for resources, it devours the social trust that makes an economy possible, and ultimately it devours our sense of meaning. It leaves us hollow.
Which brings us to the final part, part 5, the collapse of the real. So we've shattered the logos, we've turned politics into a cult, we've fed our souls to the market. What is left? What is the end result of all this?
Manufactured confusion.
The source says reality is no longer a shared experience. We're all living in our own multiverse of conflicting narratives fed to us by algorithms.
And this is the most important part, the scariest part. We tend to think this confusion is an accident, that there's just too much information and we're overwhelmed. But the source argues it is not an accident. It is manufactured. It is a strategy.
Why? Why would anyone want a population to be confused?
Because confused, exhausted people don't revolt. If I can flood the zone with so much noise, so many conflicting stories, so much disinformation and counterinformation that you can't tell up from down anymore, you give up. You check out. You retreat into your private life and just try to survive.
This is the Hannah Arendt warning, isn't it?
It is, exactly. Arendt warned that the ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction no longer exists. She said the result of constant and universal lying isn't that people believe the lies.
It's worse.
It's that nobody believes anything any longer.
And if you don't believe anything, you have no basis from which to resist.
Exactly. Resistance requires a firm place to stand. It requires you to be able to say, with conviction, this is true and that is false. This is right and that is wrong. If everything is slippery, if everything is just your perspective, man, then you lose the moral and intellectual capacity to fight. You become exhausted. You become passive.
The illusion of choice comes back here, the divide and rule strategy. We see the spectacle of ideological warfare, left versus right, red versus blue, screaming at each other 24/7 on cable news. But the source argues this whole spectacle is a distraction. It masks an underlying unity.
The underlying unity of the ruling technocratic class. While we are fighting each other to the death over cultural issues or tweets or which brand of beer to drink, the vast economic machinery that extracts our animate energy keeps running exactly the same way no matter who is in office.
The banks don't lose. The military-industrial complex doesn't lose. The consulting firms don't lose.
Only the people fighting each other in the mud lose.
So this is it. We are at the end of democracy scenario, as the source frames it, a final crossroads. And it posits two potential paths forward from here. Path 1, submission consumption.
This is the brave new world scenario, the path of least resistance. We accept the hollow rituals of the theocratic democracy. We accept our role as believers and consumers. We distract ourselves with endless pleasure, entertainment, and outrage. We scroll, we buy, we watch the spectacle.
We take the drugs, whether they're literal or metaphorical, that keep us numb and compliant.
We learn to love our servitude because it's comfortable, or at least it's easier than the alternative.
And path 2 is the alternative. Renewal, what the source calls a neo-humanist revival.
This is the hopeful note, the small crack of light at the end of this very dark tunnel. But the source is very clear. It is a difficult, uphill path. It requires a conscious, deliberate effort to reclaim the things we've thrown away.
So what does that renewal actually look like in practice? What do we do?
First, the source says we must reclaim the logos. We have to start telling the truth again in our own lives. We have to refuse to use corrupt language. We have to refuse to use words as weapons. We have to call things what they are, even if it's inconvenient to our tribe. It starts with individual linguistic integrity.
Second, reclaiming stewardship.
We need to build an economy that serves people, not the other way around. The source mentions concepts like the triple bottom line, profit, people, planet. But deeper than that, it's a philosophical shift. It's about recognizing that the purpose of an economy is to sustain life, not to consume it. We have to stop feeding our souls to the machine.
And finally, the third act of renewal, reclaiming contemplation.
And this brings us full circle, right back to the very first sentence, the death of contemplation. The source argues that to resist the narrative war, to resist the ideological possession of the mind, we have to stop moving. We have to stop reacting. We need stillness.
We need silence.
We have to find pockets of silence in our noisy lives to hear our own thoughts again. We have to disconnect, to separate our own consciousness from the overwhelming noise of the algorithm and the 24-hour news cycle. That is the ultimate act of rebellion in this world. To sit quietly in a room and think your own thoughts.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we have to come back to the ultimate question posed by the title, the corruption of the faithful. The book argues we are all faithful to something.
We are. We can't help it. We all put our trust and our belief in systems to give us meaning. The danger isn't faith itself. The danger is when that faith is co-opted by power. When we stop believing in transcendent truth and start believing in a political party or a market or a charismatic leader.
The source ends with a final sobering thought on existential inertia, that we are trapped in this destructive cycle. Our need for faith is co-opted by ideology, which inevitably leads to crisis, which makes us seek faith even more desperately.
And the only way to break that cycle is awareness. The source says the revolution will not be a war fought with guns in the streets. It won't be another political movement. It will be a revelation, an internal shift. It's the act of waking up to the game being played.
Once you see the strings of the puppet, you can't unsee them.
And that is where true freedom, true agency begins.
The text leaves us with a provocation, and I want to leave all of you listening with it too. In a world of manufactured confusion, where narratives are weapons and reality itself feels fluid, what is the one thing you know is real?
And are you willing to defend it?
That is the question. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. Keep thinking,